So hey there fellow YouTubers, it's Frank Bush here again. In this video today I'm going to show you guys kind of an expansion that I've done to my batteryless solar generator system. I did a previous video on the full build of exactly how I made that, but I'm going to end up using these two solar panels. They're 175 watts each, and then I've got them hooked in parallel, connecting to each other just up here. Right now I've got a line feeding off and connecting to my solar generator crate build that I showed in previous videos, just so I can have this hooked up to an MPPT charge controller to show you guys the amps that these panels are generating currently, and then I'll disconnect that and switch it over and hook it onto the batteryless setup and show you the performance I can get out of that unit. Okay, and like I said, I've got this MPPT charge controller hooked up to the crate where those two flexible solar panels I've got sitting out in the yard are connected in parallel, and they're feeding in. And as you can see here, we're sitting at, roughly about 14 amps, 14 and a half amps. It bounces around a bit, but just to give you an idea of the amount of amperage it's going through. And in this setup, it's about 13.5 volts going into the battery, roughly, give or take. And but it'll step down to 12 volt when I run through the batteryless generator, and it'll increase those amps up a little bit as part of the step. But yeah, I'll go and disconnect that and hook on the batteryless system and then show you the performance that I'm getting out of it, yeah? Okay, so like I say, I've got my batteryless solar generator system. I did a video on the complete build of this if you want to know exactly how that's done and you haven't watched that video yet. But I'm simply just going to turn around and disconnect the wires that I've got feeding into the crate build, and I'm just going to move these over a bit just to make a bit of room. And like I say, I've got these connected in parallel to each other to increase the amperage rather than the voltage. It does function with the buck converter that I have when I hook it up in series as well, but I find that the amperage seems to be a bit better when I hook it up in parallel. So I've got the MC4 connectors that connect off to my batteryless system here, and I'm simply going to take the parallel connection that I have and connect that in. Do the same with the negative and the positive, and simply hook it in, and the power's feeding through. I'm up and running. So I'll shift camera angles and show you that. Okay, so like I say, really simple. I've got the positive feeding off of the one panel, and it's coming into a Y connector that just joins my MC4 connections together. Then it connects to the positive here and the positive over there. And then I've got the same with the negatives, where I'm connecting to the negative here and the negative here. It feeds through this Y junction, which then just connects to the MC4s, feeding into the buck converter. And like I said, I've done a detailed description of exactly how this batteryless solar generator is built in previous videos. So if you want to know the details of how I've combined this and get it to work, there's videos on my channel about that. Hopefully the camera's picking that up. We should be able to see, make sure all my connections are tight. We should be able to see a red light. Hold on, let me just set my camera here. Should be able to see the red light lighting up on the AC inverter right in here. I know like I say, the sun causes issues with seeing that, but hopefully the camera's picking it up. But the thinking really is I'm going to power an alternative way to do some solar cooking. I showed in a previous video using my 12 volt pot to cook my lunch in. So I'm going to hook that on. I'm going to hook on a USB to charge my tablet, and I'm going to plug in an AC device all at the same time to show you the kind of level of production that I can get out of this unit. So I'll shift camera angles and grab a couple things to plug in, and I'll cut back in a minute. Okay, so first order business, just to give a bit of an example of things. I've got a cup of ice cold water. I just poured the water out of my fridge, so to give you an idea, it's about 4 degrees, 5 degrees Celsius or so, in around that range, whatever fridge temperature is, right? But sitting around 4 or 5 degrees Celsius, so that's what, maybe 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's cold water. There's definitely, it's not warm in the least, but I'm going to plug in my little immersion heater. I showed this in previous videos, and just get my coffee going. and I can see that the power is still flowing through the AC unit. The little red light that I mentioned, if the panels weren't producing enough amps to power this immersion heater, the AC inverter, the red light on it would drop because there just wouldn't be enough power flowing to it to be able to run both at the same time. Yeah, so but one way or the other, yeah, the immersion heater's getting hot. I just touched it with my finger in the water, of course, because I don't want to scald myself. But so I'll let that run. I do plan on making a full lunch, but just to show you this quick example, because it only takes, 5-10 minutes for that water to come up to a boil, and then I'll shift camera angles and I'll start plugging in other devices to see that I can get multiple things going off of this unit with this much solar power at the same time with ease. So on this inverter, there's two USB plugs, one for 2.1 amps and one for 1 amp. And I'm going to plug into the 2.1 amp because I want to power this tablet and recharge it a bit. So I'll just plug in, and hopefully the camera picks up the noise. I'll try to hold this up close. Normally it does a bing when you start charging, but so the audio can hear that. Hopefully the audio got picked up on that, but let's see here. To show, hopefully the camera's picking that up. I am taking a charge at this point in time. And like I say, that should be coming in at 2.1 amps at 5 volts. So I can charge the tablets at the same time as my coffee's running. And I can see by the light, I'll grab the camera here. You can see by the light on the inverter, there's ample enough power still happening. By that little red light being on tells me that I haven't overloaded things, if you will. But there's enough power being supplied to both units to be fully powering them. So like I say, the immersion heater is already starting to produce bubbles. It's only been, what, 2 minutes or so. But I'll bring that up to temperature, just make myself a coffee and have something to drink while I get ready to cook my lunch. But as you can see, charging a tablet and being able to bring water up to a boil without any batteries involved is definitely a gain in that regard. Like I say, with this unit, I could easily throw this in the back of the truck. These are lightweight, flexible panels. They only weigh about 5 or 6 pounds a piece. You could easily turn around and go with 100 watts. I've gone with these are 175 watts each. You could switch down to smaller panels and adjust your MC4 connector so that you were able to connect, say 4 100-watt panels together if you wanted. But I'll turn around and plug in another device here now into the AC wall power and get that going as well to show that I have enough power flowing from the solar panels through this unit to really fully power the inverter, which has a maximum of up to 150 watts, and this immersion heater, which uses about 10 amps at 13 volts, so roughly about 130 watts. So combined, we're still well below the maximum 350 watts that these panels can produce. But I kind of over panel because if I'm not in ideal conditions with the sun, I know that I should still be producing enough power easily, even if there isn't ideal conditions, to be able to run at least one of these components at a time. Yeah? So I'll shift camera angles and I'll go grab another device to plug into the AC and show you all three of them going at one time. So I went and grabbed this as a quick example. This is a USB battery bank. I showed this in my portable solar video. You can see at this point in time, hopefully the camera's getting it, there is no lights on here at all. But as soon as I plug in the AC power and then hook it up to the USB on the back to charge it, hopefully the camera's picking that up. I'll see here. See if I can get a good angle on that. You can see now the charging is happening. You should see some flickering on the fourth one as it's fully charging. So to give you an idea here, I just use this battery charger as an example, but you can see I could easily start to charge up battery bank devices if I chose to. But I also, like I say, hopefully the camera's getting that, where I'm still taking the charge on here and the immersion heater is still bubbling away And in fact, I should check just to make sure I don't want my coffee to be too hot. Yeah, we're getting close. So that's been about 5 minutes, and it's already getting hot enough where it's to the point I could easily make a hot coffee with it, but I'll let it go for another minute or so. But you can see there is no batteries really, other than, you know, using this one as the example to store in. There's no batteries involved in this system. You know, the unfortunate reality is when the sun goes down, this thing doesn't perform. But for longevity's sake, you know, these panels, because they're flexible, they don't tend to last as long as rigid ones. But if you were using like a SIGS panel that has really long endurance when it comes to durability and that kind of stuff, the military grade stuff, if you will, and I think Rich Solar sells the SIGS panels. They're pricey, but they're long lasting for sure. But when it comes to these batteryless systems, the buck converter lasts a long time. These fuse blocks, they last a long time. Normally the weak point in these systems is going to be the cigarette lighter adapters and the inverters, but if you get top quality ones of those, these systems can last for years and years and years. And like I say, as you can see, the entire system, I'll just step back to give you a bearing of, yeah, the panels are a bit bulky. You can get foldable ones and other ones too that are easier to pack, but this entire system is maybe 20 pounds. It's super lightweight and portable, and it's producing 350 watts. Like I say, it's enough to give me the capacity to cook food with. You could use this small of a system in an off-grid setup for decades to come without having to worry about batteries dying and all that kind of stuff, or hauling in heavy, you know, lead acid batteries, or even if you use lithium iron phosphate batteries, which to me are the only way to go. But even if you end up using those batteries, it's still, say, 25 pounds of battery roughly for 100 ampere hours, and they've got a lifespan on them. You know, I built this all out for the batteryless generator out of $100 worth of parts, and these panels were really the pricey bit. I think they were 350 bucks each, roughly Canadian. I'm up in Canada. So, but you can get solar panels for about $1 a watt, sometimes less than that nowadays. The solar panels are really starting to become fairly cheap in that regard. It's just getting the supply of them, given the current sanitary crisis happening in the world, is becoming difficult. But this entire system is really lightweight, long lasting, and portable. If I was to use this, you know, until I was dead, if you will, I'd want to switch up those panels and probably use something more like these, where they're the rigid, these are suitcase panels. They're designed to fold in half and that, and they have the inverters and stuff built right onto them, so I can hook into my batteries and that kind of stuff. But I like the durability of those for the long term, if you will, whereas these, I really just like the lightweight portableness of them, where I can throw them in the back of the truck and off I go kind of thing. But you can see I'm producing ample amounts of power here. That's, you know, roughly 130 watts going off for the coffee. I'm gonna have to turn that off pretty quick because we're getting close to a boil. You can see the steam coming off it. But you know, there's probably I don't know what, 20 watts going into the tablet, and about the same going into here. So I'm still well below load conditions. I could plug in up to, like I say, 150 watts on my inverter without issue. But I'll cut it here and get my coffee off so I can drink that before it scalds the mouth out of me, and I'll switch over to actually cooking my lunch. Yeah, okay, so I unplugged my coffee and got my cream and sugar and all that happiness into it, and that's good to go in that regard. And like I say, it's enough to scald the mouth out of me if I let it sit for too long. It was probably on there to give you an idea, because I know I cut and edit things. It was about 10 minutes for that cup of coffee to get up to the point where it was enough to scald the mouth. So I'm just now going to take, I've got a 12-volt pot now, which again plugs into a cigarette lighter. I've shown this in previous videos. I own a couple different devices like this, but I'm just going to plug that in, make sure my AC light is still going. I haven't overloaded the circuits, and I've got a green light on here. I'll show that in 2 seconds. I'll cut angles and come back, but just get my lunch going here. And yet again, classic beef and barley. I don't know why, but beef and barley combo seems to have shown up in a couple videos now. But such is life, right? It's funny because I don't eat it that often on a daily, but they just the convenience of having these little pull-off cans just makes it that I use them as the example. I'm sure there's a vitamin in there somewhere that my body needs, but needless to say, I'll let that sit now. I'll switch camera angles and show you that everything is still lit up on this end. So, but you can see, you know, solar cookers and stuff I've shown in previous videos, they can become pricey given the technology of vacuum tubes and those types of things. And I do enjoy using them, and I'll show further examples of different stuff with that in the future. But when it comes to kind of cheap and affordable, having a 12-volt pot like this does the job in pretty well the same amount of time that I'd get out of a solar cooker. So, you know, I don't mind going this way either. These tend to be a little more fault prone with bad wiring and fuses blowing and those types of things, but this unit is, I think, a $40 unit. To buy the solar cooker was close to $600, right? So when it comes to stepping up your prices and stuff, you know, if budget's a consideration, this type of setup might be more of an ideal thing for you. You know, like I say, I do like the solar cooker because I can have that run and use my solar panels instead of being used to power to cook things. I can use them to store energy off in batteries for evening use and that type of stuff. But I do like this type of setup too. It's, you know, all this stuff is cheap and affordable. I can throw it in the back of the truck and just go with it and not really worry too much. But like I say, I'll shift camera angles to show you that everything's lit up, and I'm already starting to see a bit of steam inside the pot, so it's starting to kind of get its thing going. But yeah, I'll cut angles now. So hopefully the camera's picking this up, but you should see the green light. That lets me know that the soup is getting power supplied to it and it's kind of coming up to speed. And then on the inverter itself, getting these camera angles is always funky, but on the inverter itself you should see the red light there. Tells me I'm still throwing full loads into my devices. The battery itself, the orange lights are still lighting up. I'm still taking a charge in that regard. And then my tablet, I can still see that I'm taking a charge on the tablet. So all of these things are running at the same time, and it's all running smoothly. Just take a sip of the coffee. And like I said, this entire setup is about 20 pounds or so. You know, it's lightweight. This stuff is easily portable. If you're looking for off-grid solutions to kind of run power at a decent volume, it'd be easy enough to switch up and have additional solar panels to kind of step up the watts. Then you could easily step up all the components that exist on this board. This can handle up to 480 watts. This can handle, and I think it was something like 50 amps at 12 volts. And this is as you can see, 150 watts. Could easily step up to a higher quality stuff, but I built it really as a bottom of the barrel cheap example, just to kind of show you guys the technologies. But I really like this kind of setup if you're going off grid for extended periods of time and you want to have some sort of power without having to rely heavily on, you know, big heavy batteries. I think, say, even dragging along things like these 5-volt battery banks. You know, I got 4 different USB devices and they all spit out at 5 volts at 3 amps each is the output off those. So even in the evenings I can run 5-volt lighting and I can charge devices and those types of things for hours and hours in the night. It's not like I'm totally deprived in that regard. And I'd definitely rather pack that little USB battery than be packing huge 12-volt batteries, you know, as you move through time. I know I'm not catching 100% of the power that these solar panels are producing and storing it. That's not the point of this system. It's really to give you on-demand power when the sun is available. And even if it's partly cloudy conditions where it's not available, because I've kind of overloaded the panels that this system needs, you know, I can run, like I say, this only takes 130 watts. Each one of these panels is rated for 175. So even if it was a, you know, not the best day and these panels weren't producing fully, I'm still going to be able to get enough power normally to cook food. It might take a little longer, but it will produce enough to kind of do the job that it needs to do. It's only when it becomes heavily overcast that these types of things, you know, just won't produce the way that you'd like them to, right? But such is life. They're not designed for that. So I'll cut angles here and stir my soup and kind of, I'll cut back when I get to the point that the soup is ready to go, yeah? In fact, I'll even stop and kind of mention as a side comment of, yes, this 350 watts worth of power, like I say, I can just hook into my battery bank I have sitting in the house to amp it up. And with all my solar panels now, I can get it up to 1,150 watts worth of panels. So I've got the 400 sitting here. I've done a little bit of upgrades to my solar that I've got hooked up to the house. I bought that new panel down on the end, so I've got 300 here. And then I even took it one layer deeper because the lighting and shadowing and all that allowed me that I could do that. So all together for these panels, I've got 800 that are just kind of set firm, and then I can, you know, attach on or take off with ease these 350 watts. So if I know I'm going to be at home and I want to produce a lot of power, I just hook up the entire setup as a single array, if you will, to kind of, or a single setup, if you will, to work with everything. And if I want to break off and just take that setup to go camping with me and stuff, where it doesn't take up a lot of space, but I still want the electricity, easily doable. I just break off of those MC4 connections, grab my gear and go, if you will. But yeah, I've got the 30 watt solar panel. I've shown this in previous videos. That's feeding off to the small kind of emergency backup battery that I've got sitting in the house. In future videos, I want to show wiring together that small battery in with this batteryless system where you can kind of use them independently or use them together. I just haven't gotten around to doing that yet, but like I say, I thought I'd just kind of stop and show how I've expanded out the solar array so that it's up to 800 as a base standard for the house, and then I can step it up to above a kilowatt if I want to kind of get the full array going. Yeah. Okay, so the soup's been on for about 15 minutes now. I live in a downtown urban environment, so you're going to hear noise in the background, such is life. But as you can see, already starting to see a fair bit of condensation on the lid. And just going to give it a bit of stir, see where the temperature's at. I'm going to say it's been about 15 minutes. I'm seeing some light steam coming off there. It's lukewarm. Wouldn't call it hot for sure. So, needs to sit. Like I say, in my previous video I've showed where this normally is about a half-hour process, maybe 45 minutes if you want it super hot. So I'm just going to stop, have some of my coffee, let this cook for a little bit, and then have my lunch. Okay, so it's been about 35 minutes now or so. So I'll just pop the lid off. As you can see, we're at a simmer now. Lots of boiling in along there. Hopefully the camera's getting it. If not, I'll get a little closer. As you can see, got a half decent simmer going on in that regard. So I'll just set that there. Hopefully the camera's in a good spot. Just kind of give it a stir. And like I say, that was about 35 minutes. And the volume of liquids in here isn't that high. But for the time it took to actually get this meal to a boil is fairly minimal, even compared to a solar cooker. It's this kind of setup can actually produce fairly rapidly. One of the weak spots when it comes to this stuff, just so everybody's aware, if you do end up kind of getting into this technology and doing these things, is the reality that these solar panels, if they get blocked, you know, if the sun's not shining on them, you're not producing the power, and there is no buffer because there's no battery. So, you know, you can see we're back up to a boil again. And it'll just simmer along at that. It might simmer a little bit more, but it normally tends to be around that level of cooking, if you will. It's enough where it'll cook rice and it'll cook everything you need to, but it won't come to, normally it won't come to a fierce boil. And you can see the lights are still on and all that happiness. I'm at the point now where this USB battery should be close to being charged. But yeah, that's the one weak spot in this whole equation, is if these panels see some heavy clouds come across them where there's shadows being cast onto them, it'll drop power. You know, I'm producing, like I say, more than is needed in this scenario, so that there should be a surplus that if there is some fluctuations, it still won't impede things. But if all of a sudden both these panels blacked out, the power would immediately drop to the rest of the setup, because there is no buffer of a battery to kind of act almost like a capacitor that would level things as you went through time. That just doesn't exist in this kind of setup. But when it comes to, you know, off-grid, I still think, you know, this is one of the best setups you could have, really, this style of setup, for the weight to power ratio that it produces. You know, it really is unmatched when it comes to being able to go portable with these types of things. I've shown in previous videos, you know, where you're throwing stuff into a backpack and taking them, you know, and going mobile and that kind of stuff. I've shown that in my urban survival videos and other things but this is kind of the next step up above that when it comes to portable power. You know, if you've got a vehicle and you're able to kind of tote this into a location, you know, you could easily bring along multiple solar panels and step this right up, you know, to have lots of power that you're producing without having, you know, a battery involved at all. And that's really the key thing about this video, is how do you produce significant amount of power to be able to charge devices, run lights and stuff, and, you know, cook food. Like I said, I have to run the lights off the USB battery bank, and I'll show that in future videos. I've got an entire lighting system that I can run off that. And in fact, I do plan on doing another few 5-volt based, USB based solar videos to show you that, yeah, these things can be a really good option to have. You know, you don't always have to step up to 12 volts and then out to an inverter and go to AC power to be able to do things. You can see in this scenario, I never left 12 volt to be able to cook my food, and I didn't even have to go above 5 volt to charge my tablet and charge the battery and that kind of stuff. You know, obviously I went through the inverter to run the battery charger, but I didn't have to step up to large scale AC power to still be able to achieve the things that I wanted to for day to day. This setup will give me, you know, with the weight of it of less than 20 pounds, 25 pounds, you know, it'll give me lights in the evening reliably for years. That's a lithium battery bank that I have there, so that'll work for years. I've got a secondary one in the house, and I plan on showing larger scale 5-volt systems in the near future. I'm just waiting for some parts to come in. You know, the shipping container issues are trickling through the solar industry fairly significantly, so I'm seeing delays but I do plan on putting out videos of kind of more robust 5-volt systems and that kind of stuff that you can use. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. So like I say, I'm gonna stop and yeah, no, that's boiling fairly fierce now. I'm gonna stop and have myself my lunch. It's definitely more than ready when it comes to that. And I'm going to wrap this video up. Just unplug that. In fact, I'll start to unplug all of these bits and bobs. They're all in pretty good state. But yeah, I'm going to stop and have my lunch and that kind of stuff. And like I say, I just really wanted to show you guys the ability you have to step up batteryless solar systems to produce significant amounts of power that could really help you in a self-reliant scenario. Yeah, I'll have to let that sit for a minute. Like I said, it was at full boil, so we'll give that 5 minutes to just kind of chill out a bit. But if you enjoy this type of content, please like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching. Cheers.